The second fatal distraction is acting with the belief that I have to. So what I would like to ask you to do is start to listen to your language, whether you're muttering to yourself or you're saying it out loud to somebody else. Anytime you use the word have to, or the words have to, it's a red flag. I have to do this, I have to do that, because it is a form of extrinsic motivation called introjected motivation. When you feel like you have to do something, you have to do it or you're going to feel pain, you have to do it or you're going to feel gain, like somebody's going to love you more. This is the type of motivation that often happens to young people who go to college because their parents expect it of them. Or in high school, for example, they play sports or do activities because they want to be able to get into college. So there's a lot of introjected motivation that is painful for people. And it really diminishes their energy around it. And if they get any opportunity to quit or give up, they will, because they don't like that feeling of being controlled by whatever that force is that's saying, I have to do this or my self-esteem is going to be diminished. That really, the I have to, is a painful place to be. So I'm going to say a little bit more about that one, but I want to go to the next fatal distraction because they go hand in hand, because the next fatal distraction is denying the value of values and the purpose behind your purpose. And what I mean by that is that there is, in the spectrum of motivation, as you move towards more intrinsic motivation, more autonomous motivation, you can actually ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? And the answer might be, because I identify with my values. Even though I might not love doing this right now, I love the fact that it feeds into my value system. Now, this predisposes that you have a set of values that are developed and that you understand. Or you might be able to say, wow, I don't really love doing this thing, but what I love is that it's helping me to live my purpose, which in turn allows me to fulfill my vision for my life. And so that would be an integrated form of motivation. So let me just give you an example of what I am calling shifting motivational outlooks, which I think is a skill. And this is really one of the primary purposes of why I wanted to talk to you today about this topic, is that it's not just a bunch of research, but I think that we could take this research and we could actually build awareness around it and then some skill. So let me just give you an example. A young man named Mark asked me a question. He said, Susan, so tell me what kind of motivation I have on this spectrum of motivation. If my wife really, really loves Valentine's Day, she is crazy about it, and she wants the chocolates, and she wants the dinner, and she wants the romantic evening, she wants, jewelry, she wants the whole kit and caboodle. He goes, and I hate Valentine's Day. He says, I think it's just a Hallmark card day that, is commercial, and they built that in there, and it just drives me crazy. So every year on February 14th, it is just a painful experience for me. And I said, well, what do you do? He goes, well, I end up doing it. He says, but frankly, I really resent it. And I said, okay, then just the way you just described that to me, what kind of motivation do you think that is? And he says, well, I guess the reason I asked is because it really feels like it's interjected. I feel like I have to do it or my wife's not going to love me. I have to do it or she's going to yell and scream. I have to do it or I'm going to feel bad about myself because I'm not a good husband. So he went through all of those psychological feelings that one has when they're operating out of interjected motivation. And he says, but what do I do? And I said, Mark, let me ask you, do you love your wife? And he says, oh, yeah, I really do. And I said, you're not just saying that because you're in a group of people that knows your wife? And he said, no, I wouldn't have asked this question. He said, because I'm really concerned about it. I really do care about her. And I said, and do you have a value around loving your wife? He said, yeah. He says, and he's a very successful businessman. And he says, I love my business. I love my religion. He says, I love all those things. He says, but if you were to ask me what my number one value in life is, he says, it would be my family. I would give up everything for my family. I said, okay, so your family is your primary value. So if you love your wife and you have values around your family, and you were to say, if you were to shift Valentine's Day, and instead of saying, oh, man, I better do it or I'm not going to be the husband I want to be. Well, I better do it or my wife's not going to love me. Well, I better do it or she's going to yell and kick and scream and I don't want the pain of that. If you could shift and say, I'm going to go all out on Valentine's Day because I love my wife so much and it means so much to her that it's actually going to bring me pleasure to bring her that kind of pleasure. That is a totally different set of words and a very different type of feeling. It's a major shift in perspective. So that's a shift from interjected to identified. Now, what if he actually said, you know what, I have a life purpose, and my life purpose is to be a catalyst for other people loving themselves. And I realized that when I honor my wife that way, that I'm actually living my life purpose because I'm instrumental in her realizing that she's helped create a relationship that's so meaningful. And I have to say that personally, this has really been so helpful for me. For the past 5 years, I was working on a couple of projects that I got into with my business partners. And I agreed to those projects, but in the days that I was working day and night, pulling all-nighters, sacrificing other things that I really wanted to be doing, there were moments at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning when I would say, I can't believe I'm having to do this. Why am I the one that's up? Why am I the one that's always working on weekends? Why am I having to do this? And I would get so tired, and all I'd want to do is go back to bed. Now, maybe that was a legitimate question, but it wasn't helping me. I was feeling interjected. I was feeling like, wow, I'm having to do this because they're making me, and if I don't do it, I'm going to lose their respect and blah, blah, blah. Then I would say, okay, but I am going to make money on this in the long run. I'm not making money right now, but I will in the long run. And so I tried to think about the money. Well, that was external motivation, and that still made me tired because no amount of money is worth it when you've been up for 2 nights in a row. What I found myself doing, however, because I knew this material and I'd been studying it, was I realized, wow, Susan, the reason you're doing this is because if you don't write these facilitator notes right now, there's a whole group of trainers who are going to go out and train this stuff in a couple of weeks, and they're not going to know what they're doing, and they're going to fall flat on their face. And I care so much about these people, and I value the work that they're doing. So I better do this, not because I have to, but I want to do it because I want them to succeed. So I was able to tie it to a value. Then I was able to realize, wow, that's my life purpose. My life purpose is to make a difference in people's lives. And if I write these leaders' notes the way they need to be written, and then these other people go out and they train people, and there's a ripple effect of people's lives becoming better, then it doesn't get better than that. That's fantastic. And that's what would give me the energy to keep going. And at the end, when it was finished, I had such a great sense of accomplishment. So the spectrum of motivation, when you start to really understand how to answer the question, why do you do what you do, and you end up someplace on this spectrum, then you can really stimulate that energy, vitality, and well-being. Now, the final, that you see on the far right there, the intuitive motivational outlook. This is the outlook where you are just doing it, you're in the flow, you love doing it, and I think all of us have had that experience. And to the extent that you can have it, it's wonderful. But we also have to recognize that sometimes intuitive motivation isn't appropriate. One time I was playing, this new game? I got one for Christmas. It's called Bananagrams. And it's like kind of like the Scrabble tiles, and you pour them out, and then you do like your own little crossword puzzle with the tiles. And it is so addictive. It's so much fun. And I thought the other day, I need a little break, so I poured out my Bananagrams, and I got so in it that an hour and a half later, I was going, oh my gosh, I just wasted an hour and a half of my day that I didn't have to waste. Now, you might say, well, maybe it wasn't waste if you're enjoying it so much. But the fact is, I could have done it for 10 or 15 minutes, really enjoyed it, and then gone back to my work that was really purposeful. So I had intuitive motivation. I was in the flow, but it really wasn't the best use of my time at that point in time. So while intuitive motivation is fantastic when you get it, there's also some pros and cons to it because you may not be serving a higher purpose. So for that reason, I have a bias. I'm not saying that the research is supporting me on this, but I really do believe that if you can shift your motivational outlook and tie it to your identified values and your integrated life purpose, that you're going to actually have a greater sense of satisfaction.